for joining us on the EquippingU podcast. Our prayer is that this podcast will encourage and equip Alliance pastors and leaders to live spiritually healthy lives and lead healthy churches. For more information about the Christ-centered Acts 1-8 Alliance family, visit EquippingU.org.
Hey, welcome back to EquippingU Podcast. This is Season 10, Episode 6, and we're coming to you today from Reynoldsburg, Ohio, technically, and just a little ways to our east in Dresden, Ohio, is the home of the world's largest basket. A former corporate building for Longaberger Basket Company. They became a basket case.
Yes, they did.
I don't believe they exist anymore, but a 7-story basket that my wife and I drove past a few months ago.
Yes.
I'm Terry, Church Ministries Leader for the Alliance.
And I'm Alan, Director of Development and the owner, through my wife, of many baskets from Longaberger are in our house. I'm happy to say.
In spite of your investment, the corporation did
That's
not
right.
make
In
it.
spite of that.
You did your part, Alan.
I tried to help them. But I helped build that 7-story basket. So.
There you go. I think I saw your name on one of the bricks.
Okay, yeah, I bet you did. Yeah.
Hey, we have a real privilege today to have with us Larry Walkemeyer. Larry came to our district leaders gathering last November, and just really impacted by his message and the passion with which he brings it about multiplication. Larry's a Free Methodist. I grew up and came to faith in Christ in Free Methodist Church before I became Alliance, and a big part of Exponential. Mm-hmm. So,
yeah,
Alan, you've had a lot of exposure. Well, maybe that's an appropriate word.
It might be. Yeah.
Because he has that kind of impact.
Yeah.
But exposure to Larry's ministry. Talk about him.
Well, I mean, the first thing that I think especially now that we have this on video, I think our listeners, will pick up on the joy that Larry has. He's just effusing with joy.
Yeah.
And I'm really thankful for that. And that's contagious. And his love for multiplication and the willingness to let go of the one big church so that, as he put it, from moving from a castle mindset to a kingdom mindset. Love it.
Yep. So you're going to enjoy this episode. We're certain. Grab yourself a Boots Beverage lemon meringue soda.
I'd like to try that, Terry. Thanks for that.
It has like a foam across
it should.
the top of it or something. Sit back, relax. Here we go. And it's our privilege to welcome Larry Walkemeyer to EquippingU Podcast. Larry, thanks for taking the time to join us today. We're really glad to have you here.
Well, the honor's mine. Thank you so much, Terry and Alan. It's great to be with you and the Christian Missionary Alliance family. Love this tribe. Great people.
Thank you.
Well, I'm rather fond of the Free Methodists, too, since I gave my life to Jesus in that tribe many years ago, 51 years ago, in fact. So,
wow.
So, hey, we like to help our listeners get to know our guests a little bit. We don't want them to know too much, but a little bit. Can you tell us a bit about you, your family, how you came to know Christ?
Yeah, sure. I'm a farm boy from Kansas, and my daddy died when I was 2.
Wow.
My mom raised us in the church, my sister and I received Christ at 8 years of age, baptized at 10, and called to ministry at 12.
What happened when you were 14?
At 16, I became a helper to the senior pastor of our little church in Ulysses, Kansas.
Wow.
70 people.
Wow.
But then at 18, speaking of even years, I came to Azusa Pacific University on a football scholarship and sought to prepare for ministry. Met my wife there, Deb. We've been married since 1978 and have 2 daughters, one who is biological daughter and one we adopted off the streets of Long Beach. Wow. And so just 2 amazing gals and really wonderful times of joy together as a family still because they're both local.
Fantastic.
That's wonderful. Terry and I are already envious because we wish we would have gotten sports scholarships and never did. So.
Yeah.
Nobody saw our talent. We can't believe it. Can't believe it.
I am surprised by that.
You shouldn't be.
I spent plenty of time sitting on the bench observing.
That's right. Yeah, we knew a lot about the games we played.
Yeah.
Or watched being played. Yeah. Oh, my. Oh, well, hey, we really appreciate you coming on and would love to hear a little bit about your journey in serving Christ and his church.
Absolutely. Like I said, I was called to ministry at 12. The only other thing I wanted to do was to be a professional football player, but I gave up those realistic aspirations.
I'm sure you would have made it, Larry.
Everybody recruits on Azusa Pacific, so I'm sure.
Oh, yeah. So I gave that up and was pursuing ministry and became a youth pastor in the largest church in Seattle. And that was an interesting journey there as a youth pastor. It fell apart through some circumstances, and I started a nonprofit ministry called Teen Leaders for Christ, still focused on teenagers and helping teach them leadership skills through adventure camps, through sailing and skiing and things that I like to do.
Wow, that was brilliant.
It was real sacrifice.
I see a theme.
Yeah, exactly. So then I came back to Southern California and continued my education down here and served as an associate pastor at a fast-growing church in the suburbs of LA area. And when they asked me to become the senior pastor, I thought that's what I would do because they were going to buy us a new house and pay us lots of money. It was an all-white church in the suburbs. And I said, Lord, that's what you wanted me to do. But there was a guy auditing a class at seminary, and he said, we don't have a pastor, and our church is just trying to keep the doors open in North Long Beach, and the community's changed all around us. There are lots of gangs and violence. Would you come be our senior pastor instead?
What an invitation.
I'm like, of course. I was like, are you kidding?
Yeah.
No way. And he said, would you pray about it? Don't ever answer that yes. I tell you. Would you pray about it? And when I really didn't pray about it until just a few days before I had to make my final decision and give a final yes. And as I was driving home from seminary, I said, Lord, I really do want to seek you and give this other opportunity, at least a prayer. And the voice of the Lord filled my car as Stephen Curtis Chapman was singing, we will abandon it all for the sake of the call.
Wow.
No other reason at all but the sake of the call. Wholly devoted to
Yeah.
live and to die for the sake of the call. And the Lord's voice said, Larry, I want you to go to the little place. And I'm crying and like, Lord, I've never told you no when you've made it obvious, but you got to talk to my wife. She's already got curtains picked out for our new home.
Yeah.
And I pull up to the garage, and she meets me at the garage door, which was unusual. She'd been crying, and I said, honey, what's wrong? She said, Larry, you're not going to believe this, but I was praying this evening, and the Lord, I think, wants us to go to Long Beach.
Wow. What a story.
Wow. God is so good.
And I said, well, honey, let me tell you what happened. And so in 91, we went to this tiny handful of white people in a very diverse and violent neighborhood.
Yeah.
And started serving there.
Wow. Well, we'll tap into a little bit more of that story later. But first, Larry, tell us a couple of leaders who have influenced you as a leader, influenced you as a person and a pastor.
Yeah, Terry, there have been tons of those, but three that come to mind is Harold Taves, who never pastored a church of over 70 in Southwest Kansas and was my pastor, who helped bring me into ministry and just saw something in me that I didn't see in myself and gave me my first opportunities of ministry. And he went on to launch 12 different folks like me into full-time ministry.
Wow. That's
Wow.
beautiful.
It's amazing.
That really impacted my life. And then I'd say Todd Wilson, who was the co-founder of Exponential, because I didn't understand multiplication really until I met Todd. I'd started planting churches, but not understanding multiplication. A nuclear engineer, Todd is, and he helped me to learn to think more deeply. And of course, we've written a few books together. And then Ralph Moore, who planted the first Hope Chapel, and now over 3,000 churches have come from that one Hope Chapel's lineage. And Ralph and I have become best friends of each other, and I've learned so much from him.
Fantastic.
That's great. I love to hear that. Love stories like that too, and that connection to that small church pastor. I just imagine him standing in glory and greeting those people as they come home to Jesus. And Jesus saying, "Well done." Yeah, it's just a beautiful thought.
It really is.
Yeah, I'm so happy for him, thinking about him, reflecting on that on the other side. So as you already started to allude to, we asked you to be on to talk about multiplication today. But I'm intrigued first because you wrote a book with your wife on marriage and ministry. What motivated you to write that book?
Yeah, that's a great question. My wife's a licensed marriage family therapist, and she had counseled hundreds of ministry families. And so she had seen the brokenness and the real need. And of course, from my seat as lead pastor in the church and dealing with a lot of various churches and beginning to speak in different places across the nation, I began to see the brokenness in pastors' marriages. And so many of them just weren't making it, ended up in divorce, or they were just surviving, but not flourishing, not thriving. And Deb and I just had enjoyed such a wonderful marriage. And so we just had this passion. And as we begin to understand the level 5 church, which is Exponential's language in regards to multiplication, we really begin to see that ministry marriages really lived in 5 different levels. And we had a passion to see more marriages become level 5 marriages. And so on a sabbatical, we wrote this book, which initially was titled Flourish, but to go with one of our Exponential conference themes is now Together with Family. A lot of folks have told us it's really helped them in their ministry marriage.
That's great.
Love it.
Fantastic.
Love it. We need more help in that area.
So we're grateful, Larry, for the ways that you've helped our Alliance pastors and church planners through Exponential and other ways. We're seeking to be a family of churches that makes and multiplies disciples and churches. And you've been helpful to us. You've been helpful to our national leaders, our district leaders, as you came and spoke to us last November. So can you tell us about the tipping point when your church moved from an addition mindset to a multiplication mindset?
Yeah, Terry, thanks for that question and that opening to tell what really is a God story. And if I don't start there, we start in the wrong place, because only the Lord could write a story like ours. And so I mentioned that we came down to North Long Beach, and as I came down there, I'd been asked to be the pastor of this much larger church, and I came and I'd been really schooled on church growth. That 91 was kind of one of the apexes of church growth movement. Sure. And I just read the #1 book at the time on how to grow your church, and that was my goal, was to have a fast growing church and become the biggest church in our city, kind of thing. And the book said, in order to grow your church, what you really need is ample and convenient parking. And I looked at our 39 parking spots and said, thanks a lot, God.
Yeah.
How are we going to grow this church? And yet the Lord was faithful. And of course, we made a bunch of changes, did a lot of those things that are really effective and helpful in growing a church. And one of the main things was we began to prayer walk the neighborhood and say, God, please help our church look like our neighborhood. And just praying. And then we started meeting neighbors and started asking them the next question of, how can we pray for you and how can we serve you? And so as we followed that, that was one of the main keys to our growth in the multi-ethnic diversity that began to happen in our church. And we began to grow, and we became, despite our 39 parking spots, the fastest growing church in our denomination. And we won the plaque. The bishops give a plaque for the they used to, a plaque for the fastest growing church in the denomination. We won that plaque. And I was like, yes, we won the plaque. And we've arrived in church. We're going to win it again next year. But we were going to have to relocate. We were running 5 services at the time. And it was just, we were going to relocate, big parking, safer area of town. And our goal was to become a mega church. But my wife, being more spiritual than me, said, honey, maybe before we try and raise $12 million and do this, we ought to go away and fast and pray. And so we did. And as we were fasting and praying and in the Word of God separately, we both got the same passage of Scripture, which was Ezekiel chapter 47, where Ezekiel sees the temple, and then he sees a trickle running out of the temple that becomes a creek, that becomes a stream, that becomes a mighty river. And it says that where the river flows, everything will live, verse 9. And the Lord revealed to both of us that we'd been a lake church where everyone was flowing in around one pastor to build one vision, giving to one budget, and doing all they could to build this one place. And we were just keeping everybody in that came to build our lake bigger and bigger. And we just wanted to relocate our lake, but God had a different vision. And that vision was to become a river church, where out of the temple, the temple wouldn't get bigger, but the river would flow out of the temple, and people would flow into the river, and they would flow on downstream to bring the kingdom to places that were dead and dry. And where the river would flow, everything would live. And so that revelation, a supernatural week that we spent together, just birthed this vision. Now, we thought about church planting. It's not like we never thought about planting churches, but it certainly wasn't our goal or our direction. And so the Holy Spirit kind of backed us into it. That He said, you could go and become that mega church. That's an option. Or you could follow the river vision that I'm revealing to you. And you might never be that much bigger, but your kingdom impact can be exponentially larger. So that's really how we got from this addition passion to a passion for multiplication. There's a lot more to the story then, but that's how we got there.
I love that. That's good. That is good, Stu. Love to see that. That, of course, that reminds then of your book Flow, which is, I think that's the first time I read or heard anything from you. I've had lots of connections since then at Exponential and learning communities and stuff. But one of the things I like that you got, and I think Todd Wilson has written about this as well, is those tensions of multiplication. And every pastor that's going to take that road is going to feel that tension and may not like that tension, I guess. That's why it's called tension. Yeah. Could you unpack maybe just a few of those tensions of what pastors are going to have to wrestle with?
Oh, yeah, man. Those are very real and very tough because there is this stretch between the vision that God births for multiplication and the reality of where you're at. And that it's like a rubber band. There's just this pull there. Mm-hmm. And so, I can just kind of tell you some of ours that are probably pretty universal for most pastors that want to move an established church into a multiplication mindset. And one of those for us, of course, was financial scarcity. We're in a really economically challenged part of the city, and we had never had an abundance of finances. People that drove Mercedes came and got their cars scratched, and they didn't stay alive. Somebody keyed their cars. It was just so financial scarcity was just this. Lord, if we start doing this, we're going to give tithers away, and we're just trying to we're just trying to make budget, and there's going to be real sacrifice involved in this financial. That financial insecurity was just a real one for us. Can we really afford to do this? Because this is going to cost us money. We're going to invest in our plants, and we're going to give these tithers away. That was a real tension for us. Facility sacrifice was a big one for us, and by that I meant we had old carpet that really needed to be replaced, and we had residential track lighting for stage lighting. And one of our goals had been that we're going to replace this with real stage lighting and a better sound system, and put on a much better and effective worship performance on Sunday mornings. And we had to kind of just say, are we going to plant, or are we going to upgrade the facility right now? And we had to make that decision. We had momentum and growth, and so it's like, what are you thinking, Larry? You're going to sacrifice this momentum to plant churches and send your best people out? That doesn't make any sense in the natural. Would we still have momentum? Would we be able to replace that momentum that we might lose? And there was, this relational tension, relational disruption in church planting like we do it. Now, there are many models, but like we do it, the allegiance and the loyalty of the people who would go with the church plant would have to shift from the planting pastor to from the sending pastor, the established pastor, me, to the planting pastor. And that would have to become their pastor. And there was just stuff in that relationally that was a tension for me. And with that one kind of is kind of this proximity protection, I call it, where are we going to make them plant far enough away that they can't be any kind of competition to us? Or are we just going to let them plant where the Spirit leads them to plant? Because what if they plant and their church grows faster than our church, and more people from our mother church go to the plant church? How am I going to feel about that? So there were just a lot of those kind of tensions, capacity tension. Our church wasn't full. Our parking lot was full. But our sanctuary, we just added a balcony when this vision was given, a couple of years before that. And we're like, our balcony's not full. Well, it's partly because our parking is overstretched. But Pastor, you got room here still. Why would we want to plant a church when we still have room in our existing church? That doesn't make sense. So those were some of the tensions. I could unpack a few more, but those are some of them.
Yeah, that's good stuff. I was actually talking to one of my coworkers, Jeff, a couple weeks ago about the tensions we have in ministry and how we have to hold on to two different things. This is the one. It's nice to record on video now, so now I can do this. Yeah. And he said, well, that's really good because when you're holding those tensions, you're in the right position. You're taking up your cross. I'm like, oh, that's good. I'll be using that. So hats off to Jeff for saying that. That's a good point. Keeps us in the right place.
Thanks, Alan.
So, Larry, tell us about your personal journey from being a leader to becoming a launcher.
You mean you want me to talk about my ego, my pride, my insecurity?
Yeah, all that.
Yeah. This is a counseling session. Come on, unpack it, brother.
He already has a wife that's a therapist. He doesn't need us, Terry.
Yeah, well, that's true.
Yeah. No, exactly. Yeah. These are the most important tensions, and the Lord just really showed me that, Larry, unless you're willing to die, you'll never multiply. You've got to die to yourself and to selfish ambitions for the sake of kingdom ambitions.
Love that.
And I'd always wanted to be a hero. Like I said, my daddy died when I was 2. I was hero to my mom and my sister, and hero on the football field. And I'd kind of been the golden boy in the denomination I grew up in, because and so it's like my church was growing. We won so it was really, are you willing to lay that down? And Larry, would you be okay if your church never grew any larger, but my kingdom grew? And so it was, boy, there were some hard internal things in terms of saying, okay, I love being a leader where people look to me, but how about being a hero maker, a launcher, where my greatest joy becomes in who I send out instead of who is gathered around me and following me directly. So that was a personal journey of just crucifying the flesh. And as you probably both know so well, and I know so well, the flesh doesn't stay dead. It's when Jesus says in Luke 9:23, you got to take up your cross daily. He was talking to me, man. That you make that decision, and it can be a significant moment, but you got to renew those moments. And with every church plant, it seems like I've had to face some of those things over and over again, and my identity had to become more centered in just my sonship, just being a child of God. Was that enough? Was my value in just that enough? And was I secure enough so that we could send people out and I could have a smaller church and still just be as secure about who I was in God? And yeah, I had to lay down some dreams. I had, these dreams of being a large church and the accolades that went with that. And am I willing to be hidden and go through that kind of sacrifice in order to be that launcher? So the Lord really had to work with me on castle versus kingdom, and I probably didn't have all that language at that moment. But is it going to be building a bigger castle, or are you good if my kingdom grows but your castle stays the same size? And one of the big sayings at Exponential is, "My fruit grows on other people's trees." And I love that. So how can I help other people bear fruit rather than just having a bigger tree myself?
Yeah, great. That's great. I imagine that one of the reasons that pastors don't want to go down this road is, if we're honest, is that they have to face some of their own fears. And, we're supposed to be people of faith, and faith is over fear. So let's not admit that we have fears. But I think, if I've had to wrestle with stuff, I know I've had to wrestle with some of my own fears, and I'm sure you have too. So could you maybe describe some of the fears that you faced personally in moving towards multiplication?
Yeah, one was a fear of failure. I was succeeding at growing a church, but what would happen? If I try multiplication, try launching this river, is it going to work? Why risk losing at multiplication? What if church planting, damaged the mother church? Could we recover? Those were some of my fears in regards to failure, and the kind of the fear of loss of control. Multiplication is the empowerment of others. It's a divesting of direct management of leaders and of people. And did I really trust God enough to hand over large groups of our people to novice shepherds? I mean, wow. That was a fear for me. Are they ready? And am I trusting God, or am I trusting that pastor most? And so there was the fear of conflict initially, because I don't like conflict, and my board was really with me in growing the church. But when I came back and say, hey, let's give away as many people as we can, as often as we can, and there were some folks on our board that just did not see that vision at all. And it generated some real sparks. And so that was one of my initial fears. And just the fear of change. That's always a real a fear. What's it going to be like next? What's that next chapter of Light and Life gonna feel like? And the fear of who's going to go. I remember one of the things we do is on launch Sunday, we'll call up the church planter and their spouse, and I'll wash their feet and we'll pray for them. But we'll also call up, hey, all those that are feeling called by God to go on this next church plant, come on up. And usually I know most of who's going to go. And again, that can be a small group of 12 people, or sometimes it's been as much as 25% of our church that come up on the stage.
Wow.
Getting 200 people up on the stage. And I've had moments where some of my close friends who were really important to the church, all of a sudden were walking up. I remember when Terry walked up, I said, Terry, he'd been my head usher forever. I said, Terry, what are you doing? I got him off to the side as people were coming up. Oh, Terry, what are you doing? He said, I'm going with Brian on his church plant. I said, no, you're not. I said, what? You can't go.
Wow.
God called Terry to go. And I can tell you that whole story. It's an amazing story. But there was always that fear.
Mm-hmm.
And even Deb and I have had to take pay cuts 3 different times over these 30 years in order to keep the river flowing, just because there were times when the finances didn't come in. And so there was always that fear of financial impact. But I will have to just quickly add, there was never a year in 30 years, even those years we gave away 25% of our church, that we didn't end up by the end of the financial year having more money that had come in than the year before.
Yeah.
Which, it's just amazing. So, we just have this mantra around Light and Life that says you can't outgive God, whether it's people or money.
Yeah.
Amen.
So true.
Absolutely.
So maybe there's some pastors out there who are, beginning to spin the dials in their heads saying, I need to move from being a leader to a launcher. What areas of knowledge does that pastor need to grow in to make that jump?
Boy, that's a great question, and it's a big question. I think there's different kinds of knowledge, and so one of the places I would start is just you really need to know your motives. Simon Sinek wrote the book Start With Why,
Mm-hmm.
and if you don't really have a deep why for planting, sending, launching, multiplying, you're not going to make it. I mean, God had to take me into his word so deep that it became a biblical conviction of the Spirit, because he gave us this revelation and this passion, and but it had to get into me at the deepest levels of why we're doing this. And if it's not because of love, if it's just not going to work. And by love, I mean love for God, that this is the pattern that Jesus used. Love for the word, that this is the pattern that we see in the word. Love for the lost, that this is the most effective way to reach the most lost people possible. Mm-hmm. If we don't know that in the deepest part of us, it's just not going to sustain a multiplication vision, because it's hard, it's challenging. Every time I send people, it's a time of tears and cheers, both. It just really hurts just to release people. And so you've got to be super convinced. And you also have to come to a deeper knowledge of the power of prayer. We did a 40-day fast before we started in on multiplication as a church, and it was the most powerful and profound fast I've ever done. Gave up food for 40 days, all food, and just sought the Lord in prayer, and 24-hour prayer meetings at the church where we'd lock ourselves in the sanctuary. And if you don't come to a deeper level of spiritual warfare and prayer, it's going to be hard to become a launcher and multiplier. So those kind of knowledge pieces. You need to know the risk and really weigh the risk and be ready to face those. You really need to know your church and how to transition it, know your people, and the culture that exists in the church and how to affect cultural change. And I do a whole teaching on cultural change within a church to move them from an addition mindset to a multiplication mindset. And then if you want to step into the more practical side of knowledge, you need to know church planting, just principles. What model is God calling you? There are all kinds of models of church planting. What kind of sending model or launching model are you going to pursue? And who's your target? Who are you trying to reach? And you really need to know your business plan. What's the financial model that you're gonna pursue in this plan? There's all kind of free resources, and if you don't read 10 books on church planting and get just kind of breadth of knowledge, you're probably not ready to really be a launcher. And there are all kind of free resources out there. Just a plug for Exponential, we've got a ton of free ebooks that are available on all kinds of things about church planting.
And I have always been so grateful for that. I mean, there are so many of them, like you said, and by people that I haven't heard of before and that have made a massive commitment to multiplication. And they're quality books. You don't read them. When I first started reading the free books, I thought, they probably threw these together quick, and it's probably manuscripts of somebody's talk or something like that. I'm like, these are good books. I mean, there's some really great. So I highly endorse going to exponential.org and downloading some of those free ebooks. Wealth of resources, including some from you, no doubt. So, now you have all these river years behind you, and you learned some lessons that some you were happy to learn and some you probably wish you didn't have to learn. Give us a 2 or 3 of important lessons you've learned.
Yeah, there are so many. And if the Lord's been good to us, and we've launched 1 or 2 churches a year for the last 30. Well, no, since 99. I was thinking my ministry tenure, but since 99, we've launched 1 or 2 churches a year, and now we've got granddaughter churches happening, which I'm excited about. Yes. But one of the lessons that I've learned is if you don't build multiplication into the individual and group level of your church, it's going to be much harder to build it into the church planting level of your church. And this is a huge mistake I made. I got really fixated on planting churches, but didn't understand the foundation of multiplication that would feed that. And so by that, I mean multiplication in terms of personal disciple making, where you're making disciples who make disciples, and that becomes part of the culture of your church. And you're starting groups that multiply groups, and that becomes a part of your culture of your church, where multiplication is not just, let's try and programmatically plant a church, because that's what I did. And that's why we're in exponential language, a level 4 church of reproduction, but not yet a level 5 church of multiplication, because I didn't see it systemically through the culture of the church, all of multiplication. So we'd launch these churches, but they still, one day we might plant a church, instead of planting with this, we're gonna plant a church as soon as we can, because that's just who we are. We multiply. Because multiplicative disciple making is the core of multiplication movements, and that's what we see in global movements. but we don't see it much in the U.S., and we haven't seen it in our church. And so that would be a lesson. And another lesson that I really have learned is that you've got to be willing to take significant risk in order to multiply. So many churches that I deal with in church planting and multiplication, they just want to get their strategy just right, get all systems just perfect, and okay, we're ready to go. We've got this nice notebook and this nice plan, and we're going to put a lot of money into it, and here we go. But you've got to be able to take those risks to say, okay, Lord, it's for most churches, it's ready, set, and they never get to go. No, you need to build the plane while you fly it, man. You need to get it out the door and then continue to adjust. And the more we've done that, the better it's worked. And you got to be willing to fail. I mean, quick story is that the Lord called Deb and I to plant the first church, even though we had the mother church. We planted on Sunday night down in our neighborhood of Long Beach, which was totally different, highly educated, just more white area. So we planted on Sunday night, and the Lord really blessed that. It's quite a story, amazing story, but eventually I had to choose between mother church and daughter. I chose mom, handed off daughter to a guy I've been raising up. And it went pretty well for the next 5 years, and but then it fell apart for some reasons, and it died. So 7 years in, the church was gone, and so people ask me, was that a failure, dude? Can I tell you that 5 churches came out of that church through pastors that we sent out, including one who's not a pastor but ministers on Capitol Hill and in Washington, D.C., to senators, to the vice president, to even times the president. It came out of that church plant. So you got to have a kingdom mindset that says, we won't see it short term, and we might not see it with our own eyes, but what is God going to do if we'll take the risk to plant churches? And we're willing to plant with 1 talent, 2 talent, and 5 talent guys. Everybody's looking for the perfect church planter. And we're saying no. And again, it depends on the model you're planting, but we will empower those who feel called by God to plant a church. And some of our best church planters have been those nobody would have taken a chance on. But the Lord called them and equipped them, and we sent them.
Amen. Love it.
So I'm going to call an audible on the last question, Larry. You're a football player, so you're used to this. Tell us about the family tree of your church. So you moved from addition to multiplication. You gave us a little bit of an idea of how many churches have been planted, but, give us that idea. How many people are included in those churches? How many people have come to Christ? You may not know exact numbers, I realize.
Yeah.
And what kinds of churches, what different kinds of churches are out there in the family tree of light and life?
Yeah, great question, Terry. And we can identify 32 churches that have been planted out of Light and Life since 1999. And there have been different models that have been used, from just sending as few as 7 people. But the primary model that we have used is to raise up a leader, give them pulpit time over a period of about 12 months, identifying them as one who's going to be sent out to plant, and say, God is going to call a bunch of you to go with Brian when he goes, and then send out a hive, which average 40, 50 people usually. We're a church of about 800 to 1,000, and but we've had as much as I said, 25% of the church go now. And some of our churches, two of our churches are actually larger than we are now. The one that's larger than us is just 7 minutes away from the mother church. So that's exciting. We've had just a couple of the house church models more recently that we're trying to get to multiply and spread that way, but most of them have buildings, but most of them are within commuting distance because the mother church continues to feed the church. And so within 30 minutes, most of the churches have been planted. But we have planted in as far away as Philadelphia and in other places in Southern California, different models of churches. I haven't even talked about international, because what happened once we got the multiplication DNA, we started planting all kinds of churches in the Philippines, in Ethiopia, in Kalimantan, Borneo, among the Dayak tribe. We've sent missionaries out just with this multiplication idea. I kind of confess that because I failed to really instill multiplication DNA, we haven't had that generational multiplication power. So we've got about 5 or 6 granddaughters now, but we should have about 20 or 30 by now, and we don't. So that message is coming on more and more into the life of the river.
Well, love the way you think, love your heart, love the way you trust God. And speaking of multiplication, may God multiply your kind of leaders across evangelical Christianity in the U.S. and around the world. So again, Larry, thanks for taking the time to be with us and talk to us today. We're very grateful.
Yes, we are.
Well, thanks, Terry and Alan. Thanks for your ministry and all that you're doing to lead the church forward. And I just bless you. May your tribe multiply. We need a lot more of you.
Thank you. Well, Alan, I'm always inspired when I listen to Larry, and today was no exception to that. What would you like to say to our listeners based on Larry's message to us today?
Well, I would like them to be inspired. Yeah. I think, we talk about, making a kingdom impact and not just having a bigger castle. I want them to be inspired for gospel impact through that kind of thinking. But I also do want them to be honest that if they really want to pursue that, it is going to be hard. There are going to be sacrifices to be made. There are going to be tensions to be managed. And it really comes, John 12, Jesus said, unless the seed falls into the ground and dies, he will bear no fruit. So there's a part of it that we just have to die to ourselves so that we can bear that fruit. So I would really encourage leaders to be inspired, but also to be honest about it.
So grab some of Larry's books on multiplication, and grab the one on marriage while you're at it. And
if I can encourage, and we're always putting together Exponential learning communities, which is a group of 25 pastors that go to 3 meetings in a year, plus do some other homework to focus on learn about multiplication. And if you're interested in that, contact your district leader. That's a great way to get plugged into that. It's a great place to learn in the context with other Alliance pastors.
I've heard nothing but good stuff about the people
it's
from
fantastic.
The people who have been involved in this.
They're good.
So next time on EquippingU Podcast, Episode 7 of Season 10, we'll be talking to Dr. Scott Ream, pastor at Somerset Alliance Church. But he has some great research and tools related to avoiding pastoral burnout. And boy, it's an important message.
Sure is.
Never been more important. So we love having you with us and look forward to having you with us again next time. Meanwhile, keep the faith.
Thanks for joining us on this episode of the EquippingU podcast. If you liked this episode, please consider subscribing and sharing it with a friend. For more information about this podcast and other ministries of the Alliance, visit EquippingU.org.